Preseason week 1, the Audible is back in action. I am with my guys, as always, Donnie, Rightside, and the Whale Capper, and we're getting to work early, ready to get that cash. We have already done all of our divisional breakdowns. We've talked all about future bets, and now it is time to start breaking down each and every game all year long, and I'm pumped. Our first live show of the year. We have Nutflush Allen, Ron Crawford in our chat. And it's going off on a Tuesday. Donnie Rightside, how are you doing on this Tuesday afternoon? First live show of the NFL season. How you doing?
Yeah, it's kind of fun. You got to get back in here to the chat box, got to have a little bit of fun. And I always caution people, preseason football, I'm not a huge gambler in it, but I'm sure there's some sides that we can take a look at. But Jimmy, isn't it just fun to talk football again? I mean, we're so close to the live bullets flying here. Full slate this weekend. We'll see some of those quarterback battles come to life. We'll see which coaches really care in the preseason. But more importantly, it's just back in our life, and it's a wonderful thing.
It is a wonderful thing. We have Vinny Cornell, Sean Mick, Warwin 440, Raphael, A. Hilly, getting ready to talk some football. Whale Capper, first live show of the year in beautiful Los Angeles, California. I'm just guessing that's where you are, but I'm predicting you're there. How are you doing on this Tuesday morning?
I couldn't be doing better, man. It is great to talk football again. Great to be back with you guys. Great to have the chat box back. I hope you enjoyed all of our preseason preview stuff. I thought there was some absolute gems in there. If you haven't already seen them, go back and check them out because it's all still very fresh, very relevant. We are in regular season mode, even though it's the preseason. So I'm fired up, man.
I'm fired up as well. But I did put a halt to my future bets. I did think I was getting a little ahead of myself. So I only made those first two bets. I put 400 on each. The Bills over 6.5, the Dolphins under 5.5, and then I stopped. There's more futures I want to make, and I'm also not somebody who hammers preseason NFL sides and totals hard. But while we talk about these matchups, I'd also like to talk about some of the futures that I still would like to make. That being the Lions, the Falcons, the Chargers, the Colts, and I guess that's probably the main ones I want to focus on at this point that I haven't made. We have Shane says, Whale brother, I say hello from Dublin, Ireland. Many thanks for all the great podcasts. Willie says you guys are great. Chris Gill says, what up? Jimmy and Lowbaggers. Donnie, a Philly guy. Philly in the house. And 99 Judge Champ says, NFL, let's go. Let's start with the first game on this docket. So we have 11 games coming up this Thursday, week 1 of the preseason. We're going to be starting with the Jets at Giants. The Jets open as 2-point favorites. It's down to 1.5 at some books and 1. The total opened at 35. It's now down at 33, but Pinnacle still hanging at 33.5. We have Jets head coach Adam Gase, career in the preseason 5-7 against the spread and 8-3-1 to the over. In the over-under, he's the only coach that I think he's, and we'll go over all these, but I believe he's the only coach that trends to overs in preseason football. Then we have Pat Shurmur, 6-7 against the spread and 6-6-1 to the over and unders. We talked about the Jets in our breakdowns. We talked about this team probably having more volatility than any other team in the league, where they could win 10 games, they could win 5 games. The front office has been a mess. I'm not a big Gase fan. That was a terrible team last year at 4-12. How much can Le'Veon Bell change that? Well, we won't know in week 1 of preseason. But they do have Quinnen Williams. We know C.J. Mosley is a beast. How many more wins does Quinnen Williams, Le'Veon Bell give them? I don't know. I'm not extremely high. I'm not high at all, actually, on the Jets. Donnie, preseason football has got to be an interesting thing for you to tackle. I know that you like to study and study and study. Therefore, even weeks 1, 2, and 3 of the regular season, you're not making a lot of moves. And here we are talking about preseason football. So why don't you tell us a little bit about how you attack preseason football, if you attack it at all, and then tell us what you think about this opening game, Jets-Giants.
Yeah, it's interesting that you look at preseason football because I'm not really a gambler on it, but there's a lot to be gained from preseason, especially for the regular season. Are coaches going to tip their hand? No, but you can see some of the reinforcements that are going to come through. You're going to see some usage rates, and you're going to see some guys that pop off the camera and say, you know what? This offense looks like it might be clicking a little bit. Maybe the offensive line is a little bit regressed or the defensive line is really getting after it. And the preseason, what I really like to look for, now, if NFL Rewind is a great tool here just to go back and watch to see who's coming through because it's hard to watch, 11 preseason football games on a Thursday night, but you have some time to digress and get to the season to actually catch up and see where these guys are going to play. Now, interesting that you took about the Jets and the Giants. Ooh, heated rivalry. It's not really that case anymore, especially when you're looking in game one to see how many people are going to play. But looking at this, you're going to take maybe a look at the quarterback play. Is Sam Darnold going to take any snaps in this one? You do have Trevor Siemian, who might be able to get some snaps there, who is an NFL veteran. Davis Webb, used to be on the Giants, but obviously didn't work out there. We'll see how much he plays. But Eli Manning, we know he's probably not going to play a lot here. But then they're going to unleash Daniel Jones and see what they have with him. And also behind the, Alex Tanny, Kyle Lauletta behind him. So sometimes you want to take a look at that overall quarterback battle because the teams that have those quarterback battles with veterans, they're probably the ones you're going to want to pick on because they have a lot to stake here. Whether or not Eli Manning plays well or Sam Darnold plays well, probably not going to play too much in this picture. So when you take a look at this game here, I'm going to look to see maybe if Trevor Siemian gets a bulk of the actual snaps in this game, might be a little bit of a lean towards the New York Jets in this one coming out early here in the preseason, Jimmy.
We have a Giants team that has already started with the injuries or excuses or whatever you want to call what's going to happen to them this season. It's interesting, of all of the totals in these week 1 Thursday games, this is the second lowest, although it involves a coach in Gase who trends to overs in preseason football. I really like both of your breakdowns of this Giants squad. And one was that they could possibly be a sneaky over team if you take it at 6 because of Saquon Barkley. And you guys both made very interesting arguments about Saquon Barkley and about how when you have Barkley on your team, you're never going to be that bad. And sometimes in professional sports, you need to be the worst team in the league for a couple years to then be the best team, or else you're stuck in this land of mediocrity that brings you absolutely nothing. Whale Capper, the first game on our docket is Jets-Giants. Briefly, where do you see these teams? Do you see one team moving towards respectability faster than another? And how do you tackle preseason football?
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head with my temperature of the Giants. Like, they are kind of destined for purgatory around 8-8, for the foreseeable future because, they have a talent who is as dynamic as Saquon Barkley, and yet their quarterback play is so far below average. You look at their offensive stats last year, and they're pretty good. Like, they were not as bad a team as people remember. Their issue is that, with liability at the most important position on the field, you're going to lose games that you should win. And they had some bad luck bounces last year, and but overall, I was not impressed with the way they addressed some of the key issues on their roster. And the Giants are, they look like a 7-9 type of team this year, so over 6 is probably reasonable. But I don't think that you should necessarily be getting prepared for for a playoff run here. As far as the way that the temperature of these teams has kind of changed over the course of the preseason so far, surely the Jets are kind of rising as far as I'm looking at teams. Bringing Khalil out of retirement, but to have him anchor your offensive line from the center position was a huge coup. I have no idea how they pulled that off. They did not address their offensive line as much as they ought to have in the offseason, so bringing him in was nice. I like, and it's easy to get caught up in all the positive, reporting about all of the young players in the preseason, and there's certainly been a lot out of the Jets. But from what I've seen, Darnold clearly has done a nice job of developing chemistry with some of the young players that they've brought into their offensive fold. I love the potential for Crowder to kind of be a safety valve for him, and then having him take some deeper shots down the field to his speed guys. They have the right mix to have a really dynamic and interesting and talented offense this year. And I'm kind of buying in a little bit to some of the talent they have on the defensive side of the ball too. So overall, I would say the Jets are probably rising faster than most other teams in terms of my perception of them from the true off season to now having seen them put in about 10 or 11 practices here. And, the Giants are trending the other way with the losses to their wide receivers. Putting all this together into a handicap for this week 1 preseason game, I think you identified the right spot, which is attack the over in this one. The Giants are going to have to be throwing the ball more than you would expect otherwise. Number one, they're incentivized to try to test out some of these pieces at wide receiver to figure out how they're going to fill those holes. Number two, they desperately need some positive buzz for Daniel Jones here. Get the momentum going in the right direction, because everything we've seen coming out of camp from him, incomplete passes, throwing it out of bounds and, getting intercepted by the defense. He needs some positive buzz here. So I wouldn't be surprised at all if they put a little bit extra, into the game plan to get him some looks, some high confidence looks, get him a couple of plays where he gets on the scoreboard. So I think overall, with the low total that we have and with the potential for the Giants to be passing in this game, it makes sense to me that the line's moved a little bit in their direction. And I think there's still some decent value on the over in this one.
Yeah, the over sounds interesting. And I know with 11 games, we can't break down these individual games for too long. But I have a quick question on both you guys, talking about angles. The way I see it with the Giants dealing with injuries to their wide receiving core, knowing that Saquon Barkley is going to be a workhorse, my question is, do you have any belief in this Giants defense? We have last year's third-rounder defensive end B.J. Hill getting another year. We know what Dexter Lawrence is capable of. If this defense can be good, knowing that they're not going to be able to get chunks of yards to their wide receiver, obviously they will with Evan Ingram, but he's not, 40 yards downfield. So would Giants unders be a sneaky move early in the season, because we know they're going to be running the ball a ton? We'll start with you, Donnie. Do you think this Giants defense could allow a week 1 or week 2 unders?
Yeah, it's kind of interesting because I almost look at how the defense is going to play off of the offense, because this is no longer the, Eli Manning. Look, you want to keep the turnovers down for Eli Manning. That's going to be a key, because I like the boom or bust guys. When we talk about Ryan Fitzpatrick, Eli's a lot the same. Like, hey, if it's going to be one-on-one coverage or double coverage downfield, I'm going to throw into it and make bad decisions. Bad decisions often lead to points for the other team as well. But the one interesting thing is you're not looking at that anymore with Odell Beckham going deep. Now you have Golden Tate comes over. He's going to be suspended. You have to be really smart with Saquon Barkley in the backfield. If they think they're just going to say, you know what, why don't we just use up the best years of Saquon Barkley on some bad teams? I think they're going to play more of a slower tempo pace on offense, but not in the fact of the way they call the plays, but just the explosiveness is gone. Because what's the main reason you're going to want to stop the New York Giants? Key on Saquon Barkley. That's going to leave some matchups on the outside, but can these guys actually defeat those matchups? Because you have banged up wide receivers. You have a nice tight end who can get down the field in Evan Ingram, but outside of that, where's all this offense going to come? So I think it actually plays into the defense saying, you know what, if we're the Giants, we'd rather go on 7, 8, 9 play drives as opposed to 2 plays, 81 yards with an Odell Beckham 47-yard touchdown catch. That's not going to be the case this year. So you might be on to something a little bit and playing towards the unders, because that offense, I don't know how explosive it's going to be.
I don't imagine it being that explosive at all. And then we have some vets coming in. I know the defense has been shoddy the last couple of years, but then you have Antoine Bethea coming in from Arizona, Jabril Peppers coming in from Cleveland. Do you have any hope in this defense? And do you think that maybe unders early in the season might be a look for the Giants, Wildcapper?
So I'm going to challenge a couple of thoughts here. First of all, I don't have much respect for this Giants defense. They let a guy like Snacks Harrison go for a draft pick, which they whiffed on, in my opinion. And they have coverage issues, and you look at and read what what the media is covering the camp, and a guy like Janoris Jenkins is being expected to step into a leadership role, which is problematic because he's not the kind of guy that I've ever really had a lot of. I've never really had a lot of respect for the way his game translates. He's got coverage skills, but he's not a defensive leader on this team. And, they do have a little bit of a vacuum here in terms of, veteran leadership on this team, and skill really at a lot of places on the defensive side of the ball. So I don't think they're going to be stopping many teams. While we are kind of keying on their success on offense is going to be on the ground. If you look at the type of player that Barkley is, he is a boomer bust running back. Like, he'll go -1, -2, -2, 50. He's not a kind of guy that is grinding out 3 downs, like getting 4 yards down and converting the third and 2, right? Like he is legitimately, getting tackled behind the line of scrimmage half the time. And then the other half of the time, he is gaining it in humongous chunks. So there will be a little bit of explosiveness still, even though they don't have Odell Beckham Jr. But I would still say that, that the defense is probably going to have a lot more to say about how some of these games and some of these totals work out. They're not going to be able to play keep away if they get a lead. They're not going to be able to, necessarily, come back if they're down by a bunch. So it's gonna have to be pretty game specific on how you attack Giants totals. If it's a competitive game, I'm probably looking for an over. If it's a game where I expect they're going to be playing from behind for most of the game, then I'm looking at an under.
Nice breakdown. That is our first game of the year. Jets, Giants, and you have to think with Giants needing to experiment with some wide receivers, that there's interest in Jones, that Gase is a head coach who thus far has always veered towards overs in preseason football. I think the over is an interesting look here. Let's move on to the next game on the docket. Colts at Bills. We'll just be running down the games listed on sportsbookreview.com odds page. Colts, Bills. Bills open as minus 2-point favorites and then quickly shifts to the Colts at minus 2.5. This total opens up at 35. It's still 35 in some books, but it's gone down to 34.5. And I guess this is how you can attack preseason football. Last year, the Colts came in. They had Frank Reich. They needed to there are a lot of doubters, and he needed to prove people wrong, and he wanted to get that winning culture into the locker room immediately. And they went 4-0 against the spread and 1-3 towards the over-under, 3 unders. Then you have Sean McDermott, 3-5 against the spread, 3-5 to the over-unders. I'm high on both these teams, and I'm not sure if I'm quite as high on the Colts as Whale Capper is. I was high, but people have poked holes in the Colts a little bit. But I just see Paris Campbell as an enormous weapon for Andrew Luck. Take the pressure off of T.Y. Hilton. You have Eric Ebron. You have Funchess coming over. You have Marlon Mack. Then you have Darius Leonard, Malik Hooker, and Justin Houston joins. And then the Bills have hope. The Bills have hope, and I'm on their over 6.5 win total. Let's start with you, Donnie Rightside. Here we go. Colts at Bills.
Yeah, both needles looking up for both of these teams. We went over it a couple times on the Audible previous here in the summer. But we're going to look at just at this ball game. What are you going to like about this? Because the one little bit alarming thing, because, in the offseason, you're only worried about injuries here. And this is one of the things for Andrew Luck. This didn't just creep up. This has been a lingering injury in his calf, which tends to be a little bit nerve-wracking because we know, look, he's not a runner. He's not Cam Newton out there. He's not going to be Lamar Jackson. But just moving around the pocket, we saw how much that calf injury really did damage to Aaron Rodgers when he was plagued with it. Now you're going to have a guy that we really anticipate stepping up this year and having a really good football season, and they got a downshift on him. Missed a little bit of time, which when you look at these games individually and you try to think maybe outside the box, you probably figure Josh Allen's probably going to get a couple snaps. He needs some snaps in this ball game. But, you can laugh and say, well, Matt Barkley stinks. He's not really an NFL player. I understand that, but he's going to get the bulk of the time he's used to being in the NFL and maybe just be able to run the offense well enough, because when you look at the Colts coming into this game, we know Andrew Luck's not going to play in this football game. And you say, well, what about Jacoby Brissett? He's a really good NFL quarterback and a great backup. But are you going to throw him out there to play a lot of snaps with backup players? You're probably going to sit him out as well. So if we're looking down the depth chart, Phillip Walker's and Chad Kelly's in here. If I'm looking at this game right here, probably lean towards a little bit of the Buffalo Bills. But heading into the season, just get Andrew Luck right. Don't put him out there in these preseason games. Get him right, because if he's healthy, that's going to be a pretty good football team. But just overall looking at it, maybe leaning towards a little bit of the Bills here, just because of the quarterback situation here, Jimmy.
Leaning towards the Bills, and then we have to take into account these market moves in preseason. But speaking of this Colts team, I would like to have a conference and Super Bowl ticket in my pocket if Andrew Luck is feeling good and ready to go. Whale Capper, here we go. Colts at Bills, week 1 preseason, and a 4.5-point move towards the Colts.
Yeah, moving across 0 is a little, some of those points aren't worth a whole heck of a lot. So it's tough to say how influential this move is. I don't necessarily agree with it either. I do think I agree with Donnie's breakdown that I would lean the Bills in this game. I think the stronger look though is the under. The Bills have been dealing with injuries in their own, right in the first line, first team. I think they're going to be relatively cautious here. I think this is reps for your backups. You want to get a look at some of the players deeper down your depth chart. The Bills, and the Colts both have relatively deep rosters, especially on defense. So I think it's going to be tough to make the final cut if you're a second or third tier defensive player, which means you're going to get 150% out of those guys. Everyone's going to be trying to show up. Everyone's going to be trying to make plays. This is a good underspot for both of these teams. And, I'm high as I've been on the Colts in a long time. And I'm very nervous about what's going on with Andrew Luck's calf. I really don't want to see him turn into a fragile player in this league where we're constantly kind of looking over our shoulder, reading, newspaper tidbits on, his current status, his current health. But it does feel like that's where we're going to be for the month of August, and it doesn't feel great having quite a lot at this point invested into the Colts winning the AFC South and their win total over. So it's going to be a nervous month checking reports from Colts camp for me.
Yeah, I can imagine that being the case. And the Bills at over 6.5 is one of my two futures that I have at the moment. Okay, let's move on to Patriots at Lions. Belichick against Patricia. Patriots open up -3. They're a pick 'em at 5 dimes, -1.5 at other books, -1 at Bookmaker. This total opened up as the highest total of the Thursday slate of games at 36.5. It's still there at Pinnacle, but other books have dropped it down to 35, and it's a 36 at BetOnline. Bill Belichick, 39, 37, and 6 against the spread, and 40, 40, and 2 to the over-under. Patricia, 1 and 3 against the spread, and 3 and 1 to the over-under. And that makes sense to me that guys like Patricia and Gase would lean towards overs in preseason because they're unprepared. And we talked about it all year last year. Patricia looking unprepared, acting unprepared. Is this a spot where he needs to, again, sort of what Frank Reich did last year? He needs to change everything that's gone on in that locker room and create a winning energy in that locker room right away. And why not do it against Belichick, who does not care? Again, Donnie, we'll start with you. I'm still very high on this Lions wins over for the season. I've yet to make that move, but it's certainly something that I want to do. And I expect Patricia to step up. I need him to step up if I want to get this casher. Donnie Rightside, let's get rolling. We have Patriots and Lions in Detroit.
Yeah, no, it should be an interesting one. It's, the sort of the teacher versus the student, the scenario, which a lot of times the teacher usually wins it, but the teacher doesn't really care about the preseason. They play for a lot bigger things in New England and what Detroit is actually playing for. But you're right. You're talking about the culture of the environment at Detroit. They made significant moves in the offseason to better this football team. Year 2 under the regime. They're going to be at home. You should be able to put away the Patriots here. Look, the Patriots, again, it just gets a preference by the mindset here. They're not going into this game hoping to win. They're just getting the guys some looks, see if they can install some of their plays, some of their institutions, especially their defensive fronts. But when you take a look at Matt Patricia, maybe sometimes down a little bit more. It means a little bit more to this one. You know what? Let me get Bill Belichick here. Why don't we get started off on the right foot? Last year wasn't the greatest season, but we added some components. We should be able to get after. We know Tom Brady's probably not going to play in this game. You're going to get a heavy dose of Hoyer. You're not going to get a lot of Matthew Stafford in this game. But just looking at it, I'm going to take the dog. And I've been looking at the odds. It's been bouncing back and forth. -3s down to -1s. I agree with it. I would take the points in Detroit here at home. I think maybe Matt Patricia says, hey guys. You know me in my past with the New England Patriots. It doesn't mean much as a preseason win, but show up for me a little bit tonight here. So I'll take Detroit in this one.
I think that makes sense. It makes sense that Belichick won't care and that he cares about Patricia and probably wants Patricia to get off to an okay start. What do you think about this spot, Whale Capper?
Yeah, this one has screams uncertainty. I'm going to stay away entirely from getting involved in this one. I'm mostly kind of interested in trying to get a feel for whether the Patriots are going to go with Hoyer as their true backup this year. They drafted a kid in Stidham who has potential, and if he shines this preseason, if he does well, I wouldn't be surprised if they don't stick with Hoyer and they put Stidham in there as the backup, because he does, he has whiffs, at least from what I'm hearing and seeing from camp, of being the potential future, or at least they want to evaluate him as such. So you're going to get a pretty healthy dose of Stidham this preseason. If he looks good, I wouldn't be surprised if he becomes the backup. That's really about all that interests me in this game. Otherwise, the Lions they're trending in the right direction in terms of the way they're developing their wide receiving core, and Stafford is developing some nice chemistry with his group there, and that's great. But I doubt we'll really get much of a sense of what either of these teams will look like in the regular season from this game.
Yes, I think there's a lot of truth in that, but I do feel like they want that winning culture right away in Detroit, make the fans happy, but we shall see. Let's move on to Redskins at Browns. This total opened up at 35.5. It's still there at some books. Some books have moved it to 35, and we've had a up to 6-point move. 6-point move. Cleveland was originally minus 4-point favorites. Now they're 2-point dogs at Bookmaker. 2-point dogs have provided 2.5 at Heritage. A big move. Jay Gruden, 11-9 against the spread and 7-13 over under. So 13 of his 20 games have gone under. And then we have Freddie Kitchens coming in and making his debut. Will he want to win? Will he care? This Browns team has enormous expectations, and I don't really want anything to do with them. I just think they're so overvalued with all this hope. Donnie, let's talk about this spot. Redskins at Browns.
Yeah, the Browns seemingly, Jimmy, I'll play off your point there, the best team ever assembled all time, even though they can barely win a couple games or get over 500, but expected to go in and go 16-0, win the Super Bowl this year. Now, having said that, you're looking at one team that has a lot of high-priced Ferrari-type figures out there. You have Baker Mayfield. He's not in a quarterback battle. He's going to be the quarterback. You can't get him injured. You have a lot of high-priced talent on that front seven. You don't want those guys injured either. Odell Beckham, Jarvis Landry. You don't want those guys even close to the field or having a chance to be injured. I agree with the line movement here, because when you're looking at quarterback battles where people are playing for jobs, who's playing for a job in Cleveland? The quarterback? No. The wide receivers? No. The running backs? No. The front seven? No. But when you look at the Washington Redskins, the coach is coaching for his job. Yes, I know it's preseason, but he has to determine who's going to be the best fit to start the season. You're going to have a couple of NFL veterans that are going to be vying for that spot, which is a good thing in the preseason, because as opposed to getting a guy like, where'd they get this guy? And he doesn't have any idea what he's doing out here. And you always hear in preseason, boy, he's coming right from college. He's just learning how to have a cadence and make a call in the backfield. These guys are pros. They should be able to battle it out. I don't know how much Dwayne Haskins is going to actually play in this game. They want to get him a look, but do you want to put your high-priced guy, your future franchise, behind like a third or fourth backup line? We'll see how that plays into it. But one team clearly is chomping at the bit to get out there game one of the regular season, when one team's probably chomping at the bit just to play preseason game one and get a feel-good start to their season. I'll take the Redskins here, Jimmy.
Back in the Redskins. Yeah, that makes sense. I think that's a good point about Haskins, though. I don't think they're going to want to serve him up. And that's what can happen when you have third string and fourth string offensive line. How bad are these Redskins going to be this year, Whale Capper?
The problem is, their third and fourth string offensive line, are they really that much worse than their first string at this point? With Trent Williams holding out, the offensive line for the Redskins looks bad. And, we talked about in our preview for the NFC East, we were going to kind of learn a lot about what Jay Gruden's approach was going to be to the season overall, depending on who he picks for his week one starter. And, I think the fact that, everything I've read and seen out of camp isn't that this is a two-man competition between Keenum and Haskins, but a three-man competition between Keenum, McCoy, and Haskins is wild. So, this is probably a spot where the line move makes total sense. You're going to have, all three quarterbacks competing to, show out, to do well in this spot, to prove that they, earn more snaps with the starters in preseason game 2 and preseason game 3. So the fact that they will be competing from whistle to whistle makes more sense, on offense makes more sense to me. And I get the line move, and the Redskins probably are the right side. All that said, it's still a franchise that is in deep trouble come start of the season. They have a tough opening slate. on top of the fact that you're probably going to be looking at a below average quarterback out there, whether it is one of your vets or your rookie. He's not going to be lighting the world on fire week 1 through week 4. So this is going to be a tough season for the Redskins, and it all kind of revolves around what can Jay Gruden do to make sure he doesn't get fired. And I'm not really sure that there's a good answer for that, especially with, vets like Trent Williams holding out, and not on the basis that, he doesn't like the coaching staff, but on the basis that he doesn't trust the medical staff. That is a enormous red flag for keeping vets on your team happy. Like that's a problem. And the Redskins need to address that as soon as possible.
Yes, they do. They do. Man, we've seen it in every sport. When the star calls out the training staff, oh man, there's smoke and there's fire. It's a bad, bad situation. And Torino Tomor said that he thinks there's value on Jay Gruden to be the first coach fired at plus 400. Says Redskins offense should be horrible. I agree with that, Torino. I agree with that. And for Donnie, Torino also says, I think the Eagles cover easily week 1. That will likely be my $500 risk-free bet with FanDuel. Skins have solid defensive front, but secondary is garbage. And there we go. Washington, Cleveland. I think things are going to get really ugly in Washington. Really, really ugly in Washington this year. Now we move on to the Falcons, and I've learned to pronounce that team's name in an acceptable fashion for you guys. The Falcons. I have had people reach out to me and say there's nothing wrong with calling them the Atlanta Falcons and to believe in yourself. But I've been embarrassed for long enough, and the peer pressure has come, and I'll call them the Falcons. Going up against the Dolphins, who I hope will be absolutely terrible this year, as I got them to win less than 5.5 games. And we will be live. All of us right here on the show will be live in less than 2 weeks. Oh, no, less than 2 weeks. Oh, man, that's so exciting. We're going to be there in Miami, but I guess the game is, 16 days from now. Sorry, my math is a little off. I still coasting off this glorious White Sox victory I have just secured in the afternoon. Here we go. Atlanta, Miami. The total opens at 35. It's gone up a half point at some books. Pinnacle's still hanging at 35. And then Miami opened at -2.5. Now they're at -3.5. Dan Quinn, well known for how bad he is in the preseason. He does not care. 4-12 against the spread. 5-10-1 towards unders. And then we have Brian Flores, who we don't know what we're going to get from him. We don't know how much he cares about this. But the question is how bad? How bad will these Dolphins be? And I think they're going to be very, very bad. Now, will they be bad in week 1 against a coach who doesn't care? Donnie Rightside, how would you cap this week 1 preseason game with the Falcons already having one under their belt?
Yeah, you know what's interesting about that, too, having that conversation, because when you look at maybe high school football, college football, we can all agree, and maybe even some instances in the pros, you get better from week 1 to week 2 more than any other week in the season, and rightfully in preseason as well, because you get to already go through that dress rehearsal. But when you watch last week with the Atlanta Falcons, and I get that the Atlanta Falcons, and their head football coach don't put too much stock in the preseason, and you really shouldn't. Just getting out unscathed and having a couple nice plays and have guys wet their feet is really what the preseason is about. But when I take a look at that game and I watch a lot more of that football game than I usually watch. Usually it's a couple plays like home run derby, Jimmy. Hey, I saw 2 home runs. Yeah, I'm checked out. This is really boring at this point. But watching it through, the one interesting thing that if Ben Kurt was in this game, Ben Kurt really moved the football well for Atlanta, but he gets that toe injury. He's going to be out. Did anybody watch Matt Schaub in that game and just think, this guy is just absolutely 100% stealing a paycheck and doesn't even want to play? And probably his worst nightmare is when Ben Kurt goes out and he comes back in and he's a disaster. You basically needed him to hand the football 3 times and punt it, and you got to win in the preseason. But he was so poor and so scared of the pass rush that he throws the interception late. So now you're going to tell me he's going to take the majority of the snaps this week. We're not going to see Matt Ryan, or even if we do, maybe for a series, if that, and that's it, and relying on maybe like a Chris Sims. He's going to get the bulk of it again because they were talking about who's going to be the backup quarterback for Atlanta, and now he's right back into the mix of it. He's the disaster. But then you take a look at the Miami side. At least you have Fitzpatrick, who's been in the league for a while. You have Josh Rosen, who's trying to make a name for himself. So I do agree with the line movement in this part, because watching that Atlanta offense with Max Schaub last week was a disaster. I don't want any piece of that this week, Jimmy.
Yes, I could understand that. A quarterback that doesn't care, a coach that doesn't care. But we care, Whale Capper. We care about this Dolphins-Falcons game. Break it down for us.
Okay, so Donnie nailed key observation from that Atlanta Falcons-Broncos game. I watched a lot of it too. It was entertaining, more entertaining than the Hall of Fame game is usually. And I would say it actually concerned me more than it should have about my kind of bullish projections for the Falcons this season. Because if they don't get 16 healthy games out of Matt Ryan, then they done. Matt Schaub is way past his prime. No freaking clue why they haven't tried to bring in somebody younger to challenge him for the backup quarterback spot. I thought, until Ben Kirk got hurt, it looked like that was a promising opportunity there. But I think he's gone on the IR, so he may not, he may not see us, any.
Yeah, it was bad.
Yeah, he may not be on the roster at all this year. He may be spending the whole season on the shelf, which is a bummer. And I think generally the defense for the Falcons, having already had a game under their belt, should be a little bit ahead of the offense. So the under is probably in good shape on this one. I still don't believe, I have to see it to believe it that Josh Rosen is going to be a competitive NFL quarterback. I remember pretty vividly some of his performances last year. And he's going to need to take an enormous step forward before I really have any confidence that he's going to be the guy. So I'll be watching him pretty closely in this one, but I think the under is the look on this one, or nothing at all.
JP says, please, I've been a Texas fan since day one. Schaub was never in his prime. I like that. I like that so much. I'm high on the Falcons, very high on the Falcons. I've yet to make moves on them, but I will. I will be making moves on the Falcons. I really like them. And I loved the breakdown you guys did when we were breaking down the divisions, talking about you get the Falcons now, and we know how tough the Saints' first 4 games are. And then all of a sudden you'll have value on the Saints. And if you have them both in your pocket, then you can't lose at plus lines. And that's certainly something that I will be looking at. A lean towards the under, and I want nothing to do. I think this Dolphins team is good. I almost call them Dolphins just because I'm so concerned about calling them Falcons. But yes, the Dolphins are going to be very bad, and I enjoy that very much.
That said, I can't wait to go to Miami. Miami's going to be fantastic.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. Well,
we love the people of Miami.
Oh, man. And we're going to hammer Gulfstream Racetrack twice. We're going to I wish the dog park was closer. It's not. It's in Palm Beach. But we're going to hammer that. We're going to hammer the Marlins game on Friday. Oh, God. Actually, Miami's the only thing that's keeping me waking up in the morning right now. I'm afraid to come home back here from Miami. All right, let's move on to this next spot. The Titans at Eagles. Eagles open up as 4-point favorites. It's now 3.5. This total's gone up from 35 to 37. The more, and I may have slipped, did not mention the Eagles off the top, but the more we talked about the Eagles, the higher I got on them. And there's no doubt in my mind that I will be holding a conference and Super Bowl ticket with the Eagles' name on it. I've yet to do it, but I am very high on them. And I love hearing Donnie break this team down, but it feels like we're at a time right now where we're getting a ton of value on this Philadelphia Eagles. And is that, maybe it's always the case because the Cowboys are backed by so many fans that it just allows us to always find value on the Eagles. How does it look week 1 of the preseason, Donnie, for your Eagles?
Yeah, it feels pretty good about the Philadelphia Eagles heading into the football season, especially in the NFC East. When you take a look at Jimmy, also, keep in mind the Dallas 3-headed monster. They all want to get paid, so they're having a lot of headaches just getting into the regular season. While the Eagles, everything coming out of there, besides that Grugier Hill injury, who was scheduled to be a starting linebacker for the Philadelphia Eagles, he goes down. He's going to miss a couple weeks of the season. Everything's been good and what you expect. Deshaun Jackson coming into camp, it seems daily they're tweeting out, oh, look at that Wentz 50-yard bomb to Deshaun Jackson for an easy touchdown. That offense is going to absolutely move. It'll be interesting to see when it goes out live for game 1. Because obviously Carson Wentz, they're saying, hey, we don't know if he's going to play. There's no shot Carson Wentz is going to play in this football game this weekend. They'll ease him back in week 2, week 3. He'll get a little bit more playing time. But don't forget, coming off of the back injury last year, you don't really want him running around in week 1 where it's, not really live bullets out there and some guys on another team, quote unquote, trying to make a name for themselves. You'll try to keep him out of this. Nate Sudfeld's a decent backup quarterback. He should be able to play through it. But I think maybe the advantage that you would take a look at if you're trying to back the Titans here, obviously we know Marcus Mariota is probably not going to get a lot of playing time if he plays at all. But you got got Ryan Tannehill as a backup quarterback in this. He's probably going to get a couple looks, and that's a proven veteran talent. Not the greatest quarterback in the world, but when I'm trying to bet a preseason game, I want to see who's going to get the most amount of time as a decent quarterback that you're going to be sitting back to. The Eagles have a plethora of running backs, so they should be able to move the football. A lot of depth on the offensive line, so even their second offensive line that comes in the game is going to be pretty good here. The only factor is when you're looking at like a 3.5 in the preseason where anybody can win, that means you're probably going to have to win by more than a touchdown. If the game comes down to a late, series, you're not trying to play for the tie. You're trying to play for the win. So you would kick the field goal, obviously, to win by 3, which wouldn't cover with the 3.5. And if you're going to tie the game up at the end, you're going to go for a 2-point conversion because you want to try to avoid overtime. It's hard in the preseason to take a look. I think if this was a regular season game, it'd be pretty easy to nail down the Eagles, especially being at home. I'll lean on the points. Give me the 3.5 with the Titans in this game. I don't think either team shows much. I think it'll be a closer battle. And I'll just lean on that and say, if it's close, I'll take those points at the end of the game.
It makes sense with Tannehill getting an opportunity here, which he probably doesn't even want week 1 of the preseason, but will want to show something. Vrabel 0-4 against the spread last year, 2-2 with the over-unders, and Doug Peterson 7-5 against the spread in preseason in his career, and 4-8, 8 of his 12 games going towards the under. Eagles, I'm very high on the Eagles, and Torino says Eagles should have kept Bennett. He says Eagles have 2 issues. Peters can't stay healthy, and secondary has issues with Darby coming back from injuries. They should be good, but secondary still has issues. Whale Capper, Titans at Eagles, week 1 preseason.
Yeah, so I share the general Eagles optimism here, and Tom Marino's points are valid, but we saw what they were able to coach up below replacement level players in order to make a run to the playoffs last year, which was damn impressive. So I'll defer to the coaching staff being able to develop their guys behind the the guys who are question marks or coming back from injuries. So I'm not worried much about the defense on the Eagles, and their offense looks poised to be pretty dynamic this year. All that said, the Titans are probably my only real strong look for Thursday's games on any of the sides. I think they win this outright. I think the fact that Tannehill was moved from a starting position in Miami to the backup position in Tennessee has lit a fire under him. The reports that we're getting that he's working with the first team guys in practice in preparation for this game. I think he has eyes on that starting job. And I think that the organization in general would not be shying away from giving him that impetus, because I think they're trying to light a fire under Mariota. We remember last year, the Titans improbably were pretty close to making the playoffs, even though they were underachieving most of the season. They still were knocking on the door. And Mariota misses the last 2 games of the season with a stinger. Blaine Gabbert, performs pretty poorly at home in a win and you're in situation. I think all this is kind of spelling the end of Mariota's happy tenure in Tennessee. And I wouldn't be surprised at all if they put Tannehill in a position to do pretty well in this game, to look good. He's been getting reps with the first team. This isn't a situation where you're moving the second team guy up and he's with unfamiliar offensive line and receivers and running backs. He's going to be playing with the guys he's been practicing with recently, which I think sets them up for a nice look as far as a first half on the money line and the full game money line. So I'm going to be this is one of the ones I'm probably most looking forward to of this Thursday slate, just to see if Tannehill can put some pressure on Mariota.
Wow, and you answered my next question, whether you were going to take the points or go for the score with the money line. And that's what he's going to do. That's a great angle. The only concern goes back to Tomor, who says Vrabel treats preseason like Belichick, who he played for. He doesn't care. But maybe it doesn't matter if he doesn't care, because Tannehill's care could trump that, possibly. Very interesting look, and very appealing at this point. All right, let's move on to the Jags at Ravens. Oh, sorry, I got the money lines up. Let's go back to spreads and totals here at sportsbookreview.com, the odds page here. Jacksonville, Baltimore, the total opened up at 35, being hammered down to 31.5 at some books, but Pinnacle still holding a 32.5 up there, and Baltimore getting hammered as well. Wow, opening as 2.5-point favorites, now at 5.5-point favorites. Doug Marrone, 8-1 against the spread in preseason, 7-10 to the over/under. Harbaugh, 30-15 against the spread. The guy likes to win, regardless if it's in the parking lot, outside. Jaguars are a team that are extremely difficult to trust. Can Leonard Fournette bounce back? I don't want anything to do with them. How much better will they be with Nick Foles? A lot of questions with these Jags. And we broke down the Ravens I think the Ravens are maybe the most interesting team moving forward, how they are going to handle their personnel moves. But some of the moves they made on defense, I don't trust. You're bringing in 30-year-old injury-prone linebackers and expecting them to be the captain of the defense when they can't make it through a full season. But we're talking about week 1 preseason. We'll talk more about those moves in the future episodes. Here we go. Donnie, Rightside, Jaguars, Ravens.
Yeah, forget about even looking at a side in this one. Taking a look at maybe the total, and I see it's crashing like a rock, and rightfully so, because what are we going to get out of it? These are two teams that are bedrocked in on defense. And not to say, hey, Donnie, you know what? Their starters aren't going to play, so what's the defense matter? It's just the mentality that you have, lines 1, 2, and 3, they're going to be running through there on the defensive side for the both ways. But having a look at the quarterback position, yes, Nick Foles, if he played the whole game, that'd be fantastic. What's he going to get? Maybe a series, if that. Then you hand off to Gardner Minshew, Tanner Lee, and Alex Magoo. And then if you look at the opposite side, what you're coming into, are you really going to play, your starting quarterback that much if you're the Baltimore Ravens and Lamar Jackson? No. And then you're going to take a look at Robert Griffin, who's hurt. He's not going to play in this game. So it's going to be Trace McSorley and Joe Callahan in there. I don't see a lot of movement on the offensive side of the ball in either one of these squads here. Maybe a coin flip on who's going to win the game. And I say, 31.5 is such a low number to say, you know what, I like the under. But this game screams like 14-10. Who's going to be scoring or who's going to be moving the football in this game other than scrambling quarterbacks? I can't see a lot happening here, Jimmy.
Yes, and that market would have been nice to grab it at 35, now down to 31.5. What happens in this game on Thursday, Whale Capper, Jacksonville, Baltimore?
Whew. Well, I hope you got the under early if you're going to bet it, because there's no way you could bet under 31 at this point. But, just kind of I don't have a side to really look at on this one. But I do want to take a step back and kind of talk about preseason betting in general. The most common, way that it is talked about in media, and obviously we're doing it here on this show, is kind of talking about whether coaches care or not, right? And that all kind of stems from the likes of a John Harbaugh. Like, you watched the Ravens in preseasons past, and you saw with your own eyes, he was being aggressive in end of game situations. He was going for wins. When we're saying oh, this guy doesn't care, well, that doesn't mean that he's not going to win or he's not going to cover, right? It just means maybe at the end of game situation, maybe they're not going to be quite as aggressive, right? A guy like the Titans could be up by 2 touchdowns, right? And Mike Vrabel still might not care. It's not like it not caring translates to calling bad play calls because you don't want to win, right? That's not something that happens. It's entirely, kind of the mentality of the coach and sort of how they're going to approach end of game situations and aggressiveness in particular. How long are they going to leave their guys out there? Are they just going to could be content to run out the clock in the fourth quarter? Or are they going to actually try to go for the win? You have to kind of break apart you have to do a decent job of separating against the spread historical records from just assuming that means a coach cares or is going to try, because sometimes, in the case you brought it up last year with the Colts, they were 4-0 against the spread. Well, that's not necessarily because Frank Reich cares and therefore he's always going to care. They were specifically trying to figure out who they were going to put on their starting roster, so they were giving their starters and their second line guys more time. And they were expected to be talent deficient, and so there really wasn't a whole lot of action for the third and fourth guys who they were trying to figure out who to put on special teams, right? So you gotta have to kind of evaluate each team independently of what the actual historical against the spread preseason record states. I would give Harbaugh maybe the only exception in the current slate of NFL head coaches where we know for whatever reason he cares about this and will be aggressive in the end of game situation. So it makes sense to me that they're favored. And at this point at 31, if you're not looking at the over, then I would just stay away entirely.
I was very interesting breakdown. I love that. Now let's move on to Texans at Packers. Packers open up as 3-point favorites. They're now 2 pretty much across the board. This total opened up at 36. It's still at 36, but Pinnacle has brought it down to 35.5. And then we have the great Bill O'Brien. When I spent 19 years as a stand-up comic, and I toured every weekend. The better you are at stand-up, the more people in the audience go, "Oh wow, I could do that. Look how easy that is. It's so easy." And it's the opposite with Bill O'Brien. when I watch him coach, I'm like, look at what terrible this. I could do this. I could do that. I could do this better than Bill O'Brien. What a joke. But in preseason, he steps up. What an asshole. 11-7-1 against the spread in the preseason. 6-13 towards the over-unders, towards the under. And then we have Matt LaFleur, and I loved some of the points you brought up, Capper, about Matt LaFleur. When we were breaking down this Packers team, a lot of question marks around these Packers, and that's why they're under 9.5 is so heavily juiced. Donnie Rightside, Texans at Packers. How do you see this week 1 preseason banging out?
Yeah, obviously, Aaron Rodgers probably going to be available in this game, so we go right to the backup quarterbacks and who possibly, A.J. McCarron will be backing up today backing up this week with Deshaun Watson out there. Don't think he's going to get that much playing time, but you should have a better backup scenario for the Texans as opposed to Deshaun Kaiser out there for the Green Bay Packers. It's in Green Bay. I know they're going to show up. The fans will be rowdy. They're always excited out there. And, we see them even this week when you're watching NFL Live or any of the updates coming out there. These two teams are practicing and getting quite familiar with each other, including a couple late hits. So you might get a little bit of a spirited start in this one. We'll see the way it finishes up. You're right. Bill O'Brien, one of those type guys that just can't make those game day decisions that make sense in the regular season. But in the preseason, he has been pretty good. I'll lean on taking the points right here. I just think A.J. McCarron might get a little bit more burn in this one. I'll take the points here with the Houston Texans.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Would you have a lean? Are you thinking of making a move on this game, Capper?
No, I think the right look is the under here, and it's for the same reason, one of the same reasons Donnie just brought up. These guys have been practicing physically for multiple days with each other. There's familiarity brewing here. I wouldn't be surprised at all if you see the defensive, sides of the ball have an edge. Especially in the first half of this game. First half under is probably the best way to attack this. You did never really know what you're going to get in the second half of some of these preseason games. But it's worth noting that the refs are going to be emphasizing offensive holding this year in the preseason, trying to get across a couple points of emphasis as far as penalizing the offensive line. We've seen that in the past have kind of drive killing effects and really impact. No better penalty in all of the sport than an offensive hold when you have an under ticket in your pocket. And it wouldn't surprise me at all if we see a decent amount of that with the Houston Texans, probably one of the lesser offensive line units across the league, combined with the fact that you're probably going to have a lot of defensive spirit and intensity after the way that these two have practiced. So I'm looking for a first half under in this one.
First half under. Interesting. That's an interesting look. I'm going to make a note here that is a first half that appeals to you the most. Okay, let's move on. We have to go through these final three games a little bit quicker. Let's go Panthers at Bears. Panthers at Bears. The total opens at 35. It's now at 37.5, the highest of any total on Thursday night. The Bears open at -4. They're now -3 across the board. Ron Rivera, 17-14-1 against the spread. And here he is. Here's the second coach to have more overs than unders in preseason football, 18 overs to 14 unders. And then we have Matt Nagy. Oh, and same with him last year, 4 overs to the 1 under. And clearly that's the reason why this is up to 37. And Matt Nagy, 3-2 against the spread. The Panthers have always been a tricky team for me to cap. And this year, I would just expect them to be bad. I would expect Kuechly to get a concussion and be out. And what happens if he does? Don Terry Poe did nothing last year. Julius Peppers retiring. Wes Horton signing elsewhere. They're going to have to see who's going to step up in their places. Maybe that is in play a bit in this game. But I don't want anything to do with the Panthers this year. But what are we talking week 1, Donnie Rightside? Panthers, Bears, week 1 preseason.
Yeah, real quick, keep it on this. I mean, you're looking at Mitchell Trubisky, who's probably, we talk about like Carson Wentz sitting out, and you don't want, Deshaun Foster's or Deshaun Watson's out there playing at this point. Mitchell Trubisky is probably the guy that you probably want to get a series or two, which is going to be a bump if you want to take the Chicago Bears. And then you get what I like to call the king of the preseason. Is there any guy that you would not want to? Chase Daniel lives for the preseason. This is his time to shine. He's going to get some burn in game 1. And I would back that up because we know Cam Newton's not going to play. You do have some younger kids on that other Carolina Panthers side. But if we're going to take a look and say, I'm going to get a series or two out of Mitchell Trubisky, and he's having a so-so camp, so he wants to put out a good performance. They want to, scheme some plays in there to get that offense some movement. And then you have Chase Daniel for probably a good 2, maybe 2.5 quarters in that game. I like the Chicago Bears in this one. It sets up perfectly the way their quarterback's going to flow here.
That does make a lot of sense. And that's probably why they opened at 4-point favorites and then came down to a 3. What do you see here, Whale Capper?
Oh, well, Donnie sold me. I mean, Donnie knows his Bears. We know that. If we know anything from Audible from 1 year here. So I would say, the Bears do make sense as a look, and kind of on the points that Donnie brought up about who's going to be, predominantly at quarterback position. And I would say I get your points on the Panthers generally, Jimmy, but, have a little bit of an open mind. The opening slate of games that they got is really pretty soft. And they might be able to build a little bit of momentum early in the season here on that kind of soft slate. You never really, once you get a little momentum going, crazy things can happen. And the NFC South looks wide open. So keep an open mind on your Panthers.
Well, you know what I'm going to do is I'm not taking them to have an under. They often confound me year after year after year. I never know what to expect. And it's Cam Newton's fault that you never know what to expect. All right, we have 2 games left we've got to touch on quickly. Chargers at Arizona. Arizona opening up at the -1.5. It goes up to 2 at most of the books. Total opens up at 35, now at 36. And Anthony Lynn, 3-5 against the spread, 4-3-1 towards the over last couple of years. And then we have Cliff Kingsbury at home for the first time. How much is he going to want it? I like this Chargers team quite a bit, and we'll have. I really liked Whale Capper's idea of a possible Chargers-Colts conference final. I thought that was very appealing look. I wonder if he still likes it. But Donnie, let's talk about this Cardinals team. Is Kyler Murray going to get any reps in Week 1? How do you think Week 1 preseason is going to bang out?
I mean, he's got to, right? You have the new regime in town. I mean, look, he is a rookie quarterback, and you don't really want to, burn him out there. But this guy's going to be your starter. He's going to be your guy that's going to be running the majority of the plays through the rest of the season. I don't think you can take a look at it as a normal, approach where a veteran's coming in where he doesn't need the reps, because they're going to have their starters out there, and they might even have him out there for a full first quarter because you want to get a look to see how he's progressing. That's going to be part of his maturation process. And even when you hand off behind him, you got Brett Hundley, who, he's been in the NFL a little bit. The guys behind him, not the greatest looks overall, but then if we take a look at the opposite side, you're not going to get Phillip Rivers. Tyrod Taylor might move it. So looking at this, it's going to be a little bit vanilla out there, but if there was a look at maybe a total going over, this is probably the one that's going to excite the fans a little bit. You're going to let your starter, which would be Kyler Murray, play at least till he gets a feel good, which means a touchdown drive maybe against the second string to get him off on the right foot. I actually like the over in this one. Just seems like it sets up that way pretty well.
That's an interesting look. What do you think, Whale Capper?
Yeah, I was going the same direction. I think he nailed that one. You're going to see, attempt to try to get a little bit of momentum and continuity on offense, and I'm excited to see Cliff Kingsbury's system at play with NFL talent. It's going to be an exciting year to be kind of a Cardinals watcher. As far as the Chargers Colts go, it was low-hanging fruit at the time because I kind of picked the 2 rosters I feel like are the most complete. There are 2 rosters that have stars on both sides of the ball. Colts on top of that, best quarterback coach GM combo in the AFC South. So that was an easy call. But definitely Tyreek Hill not being suspended and Patrick Mahomes' absolute dynamic playmaking ability at quarterback position has me a little nervous about the Chargers actually pulling off what's going to be a very tight race in the AFC West, especially given that they have to go to Arrowhead Week 17, and that's likely going to be the decider.
Yeah, that is going to be a wildly exciting game. Donnie, back to this over. Would you focus on the first half or would you take the full game?
No, you know what? First half probably is even a better look there because, as I said, you're going to want to leave on a pretty good note with the young kid at quarterback, and Tyrod Taylor's probably going to get a good majority and then hand it off to some guys behind him. I'd actually rather have the first half than the second half, which is really probably the majority of the games that you're going to run into, especially the first week, because what you get in the second half is a lot of guys that, like I said, again, can barely even call the play, let alone run and execute the play. So first half over is definitely more appealing than the full games at most points.
Then the final game on our card, their Thursday night card, and the last one we'll talk about here, Broncos at Seahawks, which brings us to the greatest preseason coach in the history of football, Pete Carroll, 33-16 with that great looking head of hair, and come regular season, he's going to shit the bed. Seattle -2, now -1's a pick'em at 5 dimes. The total is at 36 and has stayed there. Vic Fangio, undefeated in preseason, coming off his kidney stones. What a warrior. What a warrior he is. Donnie, Broncos, Seahawks. How do you see this banging out?
Yeah, real quick, we had another one early in the show that we talked about, if team actually playing its second game as opposed to the other team playing its first game. But you're right. I mean, we've seen in the past Pete Carroll embarrass other football teams in the preseason. We'll see if he comes out with that same sort of MO. Russell Wilson probably, as we know, not going to get a lot of playing time if he even plays at all. Paxton Lynch is a terrible quarterback, so they're going to want to get a long, extended look to see what they have in him. But then again, you still have that quarterback battle going on up in for Denver. Actually, it's funny because it's hard. I know Pete Carroll wants to win, and he's going to drive it to win it. But does he have, Geno Smith coming in or Paxton Lynch being able to win this? I think the Broncos, again, would be a really good look because you're right. Another first-year head coach trying to build the regime, another week through. We've been here, done this before, guys. Let's go out and play. Crazy to go against Pete Carroll, but I think the Denver Broncos match up pretty well in this game against them.
Yeah, with already a week under their belt and hopefully the kidney stones gone, I get it. I get why that's an interesting look that would go against all of the trends that we've seen other than first-year coach trend, which that would back. But going against Pete Carroll, that's a really interesting look, Donnie. And I've never faded Pete Carroll in the preseason, but why not week one here with the Broncos? That's an interesting look. Whale Capper, final game on the card, Broncos Seahawks.
Yeah, this is the unstoppable force versus the immovable object, right? I mean, like this is why you tune into the preseason right here. Who's going to come out on top? No, I think I forgot about how good Pete Carroll was in the preseason and how seriously he takes this. When I was qualifying, that I thought only John Harbaugh was worth kind of caring about. But truly, Pete Carroll does care about this quite a lot for whatever reason. Must play into kind of his rah-rah locker room mentality. But yeah, I think the head start that the Broncos have, having gotten one game under their belt, having gotten, I thought they had some things that they could build on in their passing game with their quarterbacks who are kind of battling it out for the number 2 slot behind Joe Flacco. I think we'll see some pretty interesting play from them. And Seattle lacks depth overall, so as the game goes on, it'll be pretty fascinating to see if if they have any development that they've been able to do. Because, typically Seattle is known for, coaching up some of their lesser players to be above a replacement level. But I think it's a little early in the cycle to expect that at this point, and this looks like a tough spot for them. So I'll go with you guys and look for some Broncos love here.
Woo-hoo. That's interesting. Look, and quickly, we've got to put a bow on this show and move on to the afternoon stuff here at SBR. But I have a question. So Seahawks, I was much higher on than both of you guys. And your leans towards thinking that the 49ers still have the most value in that division and the Rams sitting at minus 155. Are you guys still so it's been about a month since you guys made those breakdowns. Do you still believe the 49ers give you the most value in that division? Let's start with you, Donnie.
Yeah, no, I'm still high on them. I'm still high because the only thing that can bite them is the injury bug. I just think it's going to take another leap forward this year because the key thing in the NFL that we talk about, you need to get pressure in this day and age in the quarterback. I think they fortified the front seven. I've always been high on Jimmy Garoppolo and even higher on the coach that they have in San Francisco that's calling the plays. I just think they're that next team that I want to buy on, even though they're a hot commodity across the league. Everybody's looking at the San Francisco 49ers to make that leap forward. I just think they show a little bit of value here. I think they're more talented overall than the Seattle Seahawks. And
are you still with that, Whale Capper? Because I felt like that might have been the most interesting part of our breakdowns was how high you guys were on my Niners.
Yeah, well, I'm definitely still cold on the Rams. And so by process of elimination, somebody's got to win the West. I don't think it's going to be the Cardinals. And the Seahawks, they have the best quarterback, but around Russell Wilson, I think they have one of the least talented rosters. And you have significant holes at a number of key positions on your roster. Now, a guy like DK Metcalf could completely take the league by storm and be, all world wide receiver out of nowhere this year. And, that would completely change my outlook. But as it currently stands, they have too many holes in their coverage. They have too many issues on, in their passing game from the protection standpoint, from the talent at receiver standpoint. So I'm going to be still selling on the Seahawks, and they didn't address their key issue, which was they brought back Brian Schottenheimer, who calls a predictable, minus expected value game plan week in, week out. They lose games they should win otherwise. And unless he does a 180 and has an entirely refreshed approach this year, then I'm still going to be on the sidelines and let other people back the Seahawks.
That's interesting because I think he is the one who stands in the way of DK Metcalf being spectacular. I think it's him who stands in the way. What a treat. There you go. Our very first live Audible of the season. You can see it here every Tuesday and Friday at 4 p.m. Eastern time. Donnie, man, I'm excited about this year. Great breakdowns. What are your final thoughts on this Thursday card and our first show?
Yeah, it should be a lot of fun. I mean, we're going to talk about doing shows on Friday, which is a good thing in the preseason is a lot of these games are played on Thursday, so we could take that quick look back and look ahead to see where we might have went wrong or what we maybe should have looked at, and then there's still going to be a couple games on the weekend. I'm excited. Football season is here. Anytime that we all get together and get to talk football, it's always fun. Look, we're talking preseason week 1 and having a really good time and having fun talking about it. Doesn't get any better than this.
It doesn't, and soon we get to do it in person in Miami.
Yeah.
Whale Capper, final thoughts?
Yeah, so you don't need to look farther than the Hall of Fame game where the 2.5-point favorite Broncos won thanks to a series of just completely improbable events late in that game to realize that betting on preseason football is more coin flippy than usual. Like, it is extremely, extremely volatile market to try to bet into. So, enjoy it, have fun. It's fun to bet on. It's fun to bet on football again. I'm definitely going to be swinging away here, but don't put yourself in a position where you got to reload your account before the regular season even starts.
That is a good point. That is a good point. When I'm looking over at the plays we liked, there was a lot of unders that you guys were on, but the Titans first half and full game money line, if Vrabel does care, is an interesting look. And then Donnie's first half over in the Cardinals game might be the most appealing spot right now when I look down at the plays. But there you go, the first live Audible in the books. Join us next Friday, 4 p.m. Eastern, for us to do it again. But we have no show without these great cappers in the chat. I'll get you next week. Sean, Mick, Brandon, Lugo, Nutflush, Allen, Raphael, Robbie Tagaloa, the Samoan Thunder, Tomarino, Tomor, EJV, Nasty Nate. All you guys, we have no show without you guys. Mally Mal, Jim Bean, thank you for the energy that you put into us. It makes us try harder and care more. So all love to the chat. We will be back on Friday. Thank you guys for watching the first live Audible of the season. On behalf of Donnie Rightside, Whale Capper, and myself, thank you guys so much. Let's have a giant season. Get after it.